Hello, everybody. This is Paul Nathanson with the Policy Resolution Group at Bracewell. Welcome to our monthly webinar brought to you by the National Tooling and Machining Association and the Precision Metal Forming Association. This is our policy update, everything that you need to know as a manufacturer on what's going on in Washington. And despite the shutdown, your One Voice team is still working. We're not shut down and actually have a lot to report. In fact, we have 63 slides to report. Thanks, Omar. And as always, I am here with my colleague Omar Nashashibi from Inside Beltway. As you see on your screens here, this is the content for today that will run through. Omar promises in 32 minutes and 47 seconds today is what I think he estimated. As always, if you have questions, there is a little Q&A tab on this Zoom webinar that you can submit your questions. We'll try to get to them during the webinar, and if we don't, we'll follow up with you. And with that, I turn it over to Omar to get us started.
Well, that intro just ate up 90 of my seconds, but we'll go through it. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, despite the shutdown, this literally has been one of the busiest Octobers that I can remember in my 25 years in Washington, D.C., outside of the pandemic and the '09 recession. So let's just jump in right now up on Capitol Hill. There are still members of Congress in town. The Senate is here. The House is out. But here's really to show you what we're dealing with. The U.S. House of Representatives gives you an idea of their voting days in non-election years. That means the odd years in which we are in right now. They have not been around very much. They have not cast very many votes. And that's been one of the real challenges that you see with legislation. There's a lot of backlog. We were with some committee staff and leadership staff on yesterday for a tax meeting, and there is certainly a number of priorities that the chamber on the House certainly wants to move forward in. We are on day 31, today being Halloween, October 31st, of the full government shutdown. Now, there'll be some back and forth whether or not we're going to hit the longest shutdown in record, which is 35 days. Most of us now expect that to be the case. But keep in mind that 35-day shutdown back across 2019 was not a full government shutdown. It was a partial one because Congress had passed at least a portion of the 12 legislative spending bills they're required to do every year. This year, neither chamber has passed all 12. We have a few passed. None of them are signed into law, and that's why we're in a full government shutdown. The House of Representatives has physically not been in session since September the 19th. We are now in the longest stretch without a House vote outside of a campaign year or the summer recess. And of course, the pandemic, some of the virtual votings that were done there. If the government reopens, the focus is going to be immediately on full year spending bills, whether or not that's possible or not. Based on meetings this week, we were up on the Hill and around the Hill a couple of times this week. The general's hope being the word, is that they might reopen towards the end of next week, the week of November the 3rd. That's a possibility that if there's an agreement that Senate Democrats rather agree to vote in favor of an extension, it would likely be handcuffed with moving on some legislation that starts to address not just reopening the government, but actually funding the federal government. Because right now we're still operating on fiscal year 2024 dollars because lawmakers earlier this year did not agree to FY25. So they have skipped FY25. We're now trying to salvage FY26. There is an effort from some in Congress to skip this entire year and do a continuing resolution to December 1st of next year. Our understanding, based on conversations, they'll likely reopen the government through a temporary nature into January to allow them to pass some of their spending bills. Among those, the Agriculture Department, the ones funding labor, the legislative branch, and for military construction would likely be the first up, as the Senate has already completed those. Next up, we'd get into DoD, and always the most complicated and controversial, the one that we refer to as Labor H. That's still a long ways away. The Senate seems to be more had done a lot more work, especially in a bipartisan nature, than the House has. So expect still some more delays that are going on. This is one of those tables for those of you that like to look in numbers and understand what the shutdown scenarios have done in loss of actual productivity and collection that's out there, and it's an impact on the GDP. As you can see from these charts in here, they'll give you an impact if the shutdown lasts for 4 weeks. They're looking at a effect on real GDP of $18 billion, goes on for 6 weeks. And this is just in the fourth quarter of this year. It's a $28 billion. And then if we're going on for an 8-week shutdown, right now we are heading past that 6-week mark. And this is now the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office to give you a sense of where we are. Let's jump into what the Senate has actually been doing. Some of it has been consequential, some of it a bit more just not really for show, but really symbolic votes here. The Senate voted this week on several resolutions. Please note, you'll see on this slide here, it says joint resolution. We're going to get to the next one, and that's a bill. They're different for procedural reasons. These resolutions that were passed by the United States Senate will not receive a vote over in the House. So they are more of a statement that's expressing more than 50 United States senators believe that the president should end the national emergency with regards to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act tariffs, the IEEPA tariffs that are imposed on every country. They also voted to remove the national emergency for tariffs on Brazil and then also separately on Canada. You can see kind of in reverse order the amount of support that they ended up receiving on that legislation. Again, the House is not expected to put these up for a vote, meaning they would not go to the president's desk. In any sense, we will continue where we are, but it is important that they are starting to see some senators, particularly Republicans, speak up a bit more with regards to trade. Aside from those, the Senate is still working and they are in town. The House is not. They did move a couple of bills through the Senate just in the last week or so, in the last month rather. One's a bill that One Voice had been working on for a number of years with Senator Gary Peters of Michigan that deals with identifying and streamlining programs that support manufacturing. If you recall, we'd worked on this and had an NTA member testify with regards to a website for manufacturing.gov to try to put all the programs in one place to assist manufacturers, particularly small businesses. This would build upon that, and that was passed without objection just a few weeks ago, and now is also making its way through the process over to the House. The defense folks, we do have a National Defense Authorization Act. That's called the Pentagon's Policy Bill, passed every year since 1961, and it has now passed the U.S. Senate, setting us up for a formal conference with the United States House, which hopefully means we'll look at passage sometime in December is what we're hearing from staff, but they, of course, need to come back to town in order to move forward on that. Let's just jump through some regulatory items. We've got a few real important ones I want to focus on the IRS, flag a couple things from the states, and then we'll get into trade and tariffs and where things sit over there. This one's a bit more on the procedural standpoint, but it's important to see what the White House is doing. For purposes of the next slide, there's an office called Office of Management and Budget that is part of the White House. It's connected to the Office of the President. This is the most powerful agency no one should ever hear about. OMB has another office called Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. That's where all the regulations and rules for most agencies have to go prior to them being cleared. What this has been doing is saying that we're going to expedite the review of these. We're going to waive certain requirements for review in order to move the president's regulatory agenda through more quickly. So they are going to do a 28-day review period, and in some case, no more than 2 weeks of review by the lawyers over at the White House as they go through these different regulations. And this is very significant because we can see, even though typically OIR is supposed to do 30, 60, 90-day reviews, these can get into now sometimes well over a year. And the administration seeking to move this process. And you can see that real life example here when they're looking at, under the Administrative Procedures Act, good cause exceptions, and that they have the right to, under likewise where notice and comment would delay a repeal, and that means where public input in a public process would delay the repeal of a rule that they believe is illegal, then they can waive that process under good cause and move forward very quickly. So we expect that that is now, especially with Congress being the way they are, and looking forward into the final 2 years of the administration. If Democrats take over one chamber or the other of Congress, this will see a lot more attention and laying the groundwork for that. Please pass this along. You should receive notices from your CPAs, CFOs, your accounting firms. We've got new inflation adjustment rates from the IRS that have been released as of a few weeks ago. Here are the new margin rates for those of you on the phone. Your 37% top rate for individual incomes is going to be $640,000, $768,700 for married couples. Your 35% is going to be for 256 individuals, and and then so on, and it trickles down for there. Now, this is also important when we look at the annual adjustments, not just because of the COLA for Social Security, but also because of some of the other benefits. For qualified transportation fringe benefits, this is for those of you that might be providing some kind of a benefit for parking or transportation. Please note that there has been an increase in this as well, and you need to adjust on your payroll for that as well. Estate tax credits, those have been changed. Child care tax credits for employers, there's also been some adjustments. That one we flagged this multiple times on the employer provided child care tax credit, and your CPA firm should very much be aware of the change effective July the 4th on one big beautiful bill that significantly enhanced the important credit for employers that increases the maximum amount an employer provided child care tax credit from $150,000 to $500,000. So please get that over to your CFOs now that we've got additional inflation adjustment and some more guidance. Dealing with one issue that seemingly will never ever go away, the employee retention tax credit. We are still dealing with this issue. There are still pending applications that are out there, but we do have an FAQ that was issued about 10 days ago and makes very clear that they are closed. I'll read them just to you, a few of them, since there's more than these A through questions 5. There's about 10, I think, or so on this link. Encourage you to go through it, but effectively, here's the important part. That one big beautiful bill that prohibited the IRS from allowing or refunding employee retention credits that were posted after July 4th for the third and fourth quarters of 2021 if those claims were filed after January 31st of 2024. So that's important to know. There's going to be some exceptions in there, but even if they're Qs here. So one of these FAQs, for example, are all employee retention credit claims for the third and fourth quarter of 2021 limited? And the answer is no, but only the claims that were filed after January 31st of 2024. So it's really important to figure out who prepared these documents for you, when were they filed, because this is retroactive. The law was signed July the 4th. But if your claim was filed after January the 31st of 24, you might have some challenges. This also speaks to amended claims. So please, if you are involved in employee retention credit, submitted something after January 31st of 24, this FAQ is for you. If you've got some auto loans that are out there, we do have a transition relief. I was in a meeting about this yesterday with regards to getting full guidance for 2026. This is an interim step that the IRS is taking rather to help some of the taxpayers with regards to the auto loan on the interest and bringing some of this in there. So note that businesses that receive from any individual interest of $600 or more for any calendar year on qualified passenger vehicle loans must comply with the new reporting requirements, and adding some of these other issues here on the passenger vehicle loan. So note that that is moving forward and getting up and running. We've talked about this a few times now. This one we did want to flag here that the Department of Labor has issued a joint employer opinion letter that's on here about shared management and wage and hour compliance, and one on wage and hour on overtime in particular, that you might have two related entities. If an individual is working separately for two of them, but they're both related, then that overtime might be combined for those hours for those purposes. So that's where you see this overtime calculation right here. Hours worked across related entities must be combined to determine overtime eligibility. So would encourage folks to look under the FILSA guidance that's been issued here in case you do have some related entities that are doing employments. This one, just quickly, it's received a lot of attention, obviously, on H-1B visa fees. Chamber of Commerce has filed a lawsuit on this. They filed it, I think, a week before, or last week, rather. So this is probably not the end of it, but just note that there is still some back and forth on where this goes for those of you that are dealing with H-1B visas. A couple of things in the states I want to flag for you. This has come up in Connecticut and elsewhere and been topic of conversation here at the federal level in town, but do want to flag for you that we do have a Minnesota captive audience lawsuit that's dismissed in here. This one's pretty significant, brought by the the Minnesota chapter, or it's called the ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors, and they sued the state over mandates that deny the ability to have an employer speak to employees about union organizing activities. So that's something to watch out here pretty closely, and that they ruled against the Democrat governor and commissioner and against the attorney general in this case as well. California has released their annual fiscal year annual high hazard industry list. This is page 2. The first page goes through food manufacturing, so on. Then we get to wholesale distributors and retail, a number of others. Wanted to flag for you just on the steel using side and also even some of the foundries. These are what's listed. Those of you that are not in HR, DART means days away, restricted and transferred. English, it means days when somebody had to miss because of an incident in their shops. And you note there we are on the number of establishment on those steel product manufacturing from purchased steel, which would cover a good number of our members that are in there. Sticking with California for a couple more here, New York, and a few other Democrat-led states are looking to counter the U.S. National Labor Relations Board by taking over effectively some of the enforcement roles from the federal government where the states don't believe there's enough happening there. So the governor signed on September 30th a law that will allow for private sector labor disputes to go through the California Labor Board. They'll be able to handle union elections, unfair labor practices. So this is pretty close to exactly what New York was doing the prior month in September. So that's much expected out of this state. Also, speaking of which, expect some court challenges with regards to these actions and where we end up, but this is something that's spreading out there as well. And in light of that, as expected, the National Labor Relations Board, similar to what they did against New York, is suing the state of California, saying you cannot do this. They want injunctive relief to pause them from moving forward starting in January and to take their authority back. That's up there. More on the positive side from California. For you Michiganders, I've got one up next for you too here. California has announced $30 million in apprenticeship funding to fill high demand jobs, healthcare, education, technology, and advanced manufacturing. This is the third round of apprenticeships innovation funding that California has been putting forward. Please keep in mind, these are going to be for registered apprenticeship programs, but for those friends that are in the state, please definitely take a look at, see some opportunities that are there for our chapters and our districts. Bringing it home to Michigan, we flagged this in one of our recent calls and wanted to put it into our slide deck for a couple of reasons. That Michigan's running an initiative announced on October 21st that's going to award college credits for apprenticeships. So this has launched a new initiative that will award college credit to residents who complete building trades registration apprenticeship programs through skilled trade unions, Michigan Department of Lifelong Education Advancements, MyLeap, and through community colleges as well if they build the accreditation agreement that's out there. So something else that might benefit and assist in some of the recruitment and some of the advancements as you look at these processes as it's just in general a commentary. I think educators are realizing they need to push career awareness and career preparedness down into the primary and secondary a lot more than they have in the past, and this is getting another state closer to doing that. EPA has approved a copper mine in Utah. This again goes with waiving some of the requirements on permitting that's out there and is in line with the president's efforts on 232 national security tariffs on copper. We also are seeing on the EPA side, they're shut down, furloughed for the most part, but EPA has put out a number of notices on continued regulatory action. I mentioned OMB and OIRA earlier. This is a notice that the White House is holding hearings on the regulatory side with regards to steel manufacturing, what's called a NESHAP for emission standards that are coming from those facilities. Also, OIRA OMB has completed their Forever Chemicals reporting requirement update. This is the requirement that was signed into law or included in a Department of Defense law that came into effect in 2021 requiring reporting of any PFAS, Forever Chemicals, on site from 2011 until 2022. This is a significant burden, and so they're looking at slipping some of those dates as well. All right, let's run through the big ones here. And as Paul gave you the next 12 minutes on tariffs and where we sit with things that are out there. A couple of things to note here. Let's start with the trucks. This is the medium and heavy duty vehicles and parts. It's called the MHDVP 232 case. This one has been forecast for some time. The short of it is we are looking at a 25% tariff on medium and heavy duty trucks. That's what you're seeing here under the general duty rates. But then for buses and certain other vehicles, it is at 10%. But the vast majority now passenger vehicles and parts from the April, I think, 2025 case initiated, now adding with medium heavy duty trucks and others. So this will include dump trucks, garbage trucks, some other haulers, buses will kind of be under some of these here. And so that's something you'll need to watch really closely. So what they ended up doing is we are effective tomorrow is November the 1st. So tonight we have a 25% tariff on medium and heavy duty trucks. These are the class 3 and class 8s, your 10,001 pounds and then 26,000 pounds and up. They have a 10% tariff on your motor coaches. Those are usually the 55 passengers, and some of the others for other transits, other buses that are moving folks around. Those are the 10% there. I'm not going to get into the offset program. The OEMs have really focused quite a bit on that, and has some of the other auto parts associations. So we'll leave it up to them to really get into the updates on the offsets. But please note that this action did not just touch medium heavy duty trucks. It did also make some changes to the automotive passenger offset program, extending that one that was initiated earlier in the year through 2030. And this allows the OEMs to reduce some of the tariff impact on a vehicle if they've got certain content requirements here in the United States, hence the offset in the duty credit. And that is now applying to the heavy duty trucks and then also now on automotive retroactively. For your reference, we're going to skip through here quickly some of the reference slides that you might need through these processes. Here's going to be the actual technical guidance that was posted through the Cargo Systems messaging service 2 nights ago. And this is on the importation and how to have it do that. So you'll see down below, it says the M, H, D, V, and P is what they're labeling this at. So that's going to be the new codes that you see in here. A few things to note. If you are importing on the products, automotive parts that are medium heavy duty coming in from Canada and Mexico as of now, if they are USMCA compliant, then there is not a tariff that's on there, but they are in that process of coming up with a way to apply the tariff to the non-US value, non-US content of that vehicle that's coming in. But please note down below, they're not ready. Do not report any duties based on non-US content under this HTUS classification until further guidance is provided, and that's specific under the USMCA for this HTS. That's right there to hopefully, in some cases, avoid right now that 25% tariff. Depends on where you are. Some cases you might want it, and that's something to note that they are still going to expect some more guidance, similar to the process that we had the first time around. Here's the additional conforming language. So you can see this is not being stacked with the copper or the 232 steel and aluminum, nor some of the others under the IEPAs that have been put in place. So this is where you want to see verification that your medium heavy duty trucks and parts, they are not subject to additional tariffs if they appear on this list. In the stacking order, this will take priority. So as you'll see here, if it's also on the steel products or the aluminums or derivatives, you're going to use this medium heavy duty trucks. Same thing that they did on autos, that takes precedent at 25, even if the part's at 50%. Again, we can't give you legal advice or customs advice. So that's what we're hearing. Please verify. And then on the right, this is where we're going to start addressing some of the IEPAs. This is IEPA reciprocals. And then, as you can see, spelling it out there for some of those exemptions that you might see. Here's the actual list on the annex that was included. That's a separate link from the previous page. We pulled this for you. You're going to need to scroll down. It's only a 2-pager. The top of it will show the actual medium heavy duty trucks. Underneath it, the second section is buses. And then here's the end of page 1 and 2 that shows you the HTS codes for all the parts. So if you have a component that's either coming in that you are making and you want protection, that's where you want to look at it. If you've got a product that you are competing against, that previous slide is the definitive of the HTS codes for the parts. Full disclosure, just quickly, we had ChatGPT pull this, but this is now what you'll see some of the descriptions for the HTS codes. You might have a number of these products that you all make, particularly in the, look at this 8302, for example. We could see some of our members doing that here. Maybe a handful under 73 actually have toured an NTMA shop that does springs. So some of these might be an area to take a look at. And here's the second page. Also similar gearboxes, drive axles. Note that you might have seen some of these others on the steel and aluminum 232 inclusion list. That's why you're going to want to verify with these here on your chapter 87, which is the primary area. You're going to find your automotive parts on here as well. So please have somebody go through these. If you are an automotive, those 3 slides are critical for you. We'll go quickly through these. This is now the tariffs on lumber. This is Trump trying to work through North Carolina and a few other states that have been heavy in this area. Just note that they've got derivative products. There's a difference between 10% and 25% tariffs today under this program. We reported earlier they are expected to go to 30% and then ultimately to 50% on certain goods. So note that if you are in this industry or if you're making, because it does include metal components potentially that are holding in some of the brackets on a chair, you might make something for some furniture and you might have protection under this as well. So knowing your HTS code will be critical. Click on this link down below, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you should be able to find some more information on the products that are covered. That concludes our tariff section on products. Again, there was a lot that happened. Tariff inclusions, the steel and aluminum potentially expansions we're hearing might end up by December the 6th. So there was a lot that happened on there. Before we go into this, I'll answer a question by omission. The copper inclusion process was supposed to be announced on or around October the 28th, and this would be a mechanism by which companies and importers and U.S. businesses can petition to expand the copper list to add more products made out of copper subject to the 50% tariff. As of this morning, that has not been published. I've heard varying conflicting reports of how many people are actually working at the Commerce Department on 232 cases at BIS right now, and it seems, short of it, they don't have enough staff to deal with that. The Southeast Asian nations and had agreements with the United States. There's distinctions that are important. You'll notice in the heading, we use the word here, agreement. In 2 slides, we're going to use the word framework. They're very important distinctions. One is less binding, and it starts to address some of those areas that are there. Malaysia, here's some of your deals. Obviously in automotive, this is a theme throughout with regards to standards and removing non-tariff barriers by saying your cars aren't safe, they can't come in. So note that that's there as well. We also have commitments on critical minerals and rare earth partnerships. And note down at the bottom that Malaysia has committed to join the Global Forum on Steel Excess Capacity. This is going to be a really big area of focus in 2026 as the U.S., without saying it, picks up on where Biden left off in trying to create and build upon a group that will agree to limit capacity of steel globally and block certain importation. This is important for the global price of steel, as Paul is going to talk about here when we get to our data slides. Cambodia also reached an agreement. Please note at the bottom, this is significant not because of volume, but because of precedent of what it does. Also to confront state-owned enterprises and subsidies. This is a very big issue for the United States across Southeast Asia, and you can see that language embedded in that agreement. However, with regards to Thailand and Vietnam, they are not done yet. These are what are called frameworks. A framework is not a binding agreement. Well, nothing's really binding, feels like anymore, but Thailand and Vietnam do have agreed to a framework in here. And note that this language is very significant. First, medical devices has always been a problem in Korea, Japan, and Thailand. But this down below, the U.S. and Thailand will work together to address unfair trade practices and policies of third parties, and that means China. That basically is a translation about Chinese setting up operations or transshipping goods through Thailand and saying it's made over there in order to evade the tariffs coming into the United States. So that's an important commitment from the side of the Thais there as well. The bigger one, of course, is Vietnam, and you'll notice they're confronting state-owned enterprises there and addressing duty evasion and cooperating on export controls and investment security. That is also an indirect shot at China that came out of this as well. The big news when the president landed yesterday is that they have reached an agreement with China. Again, no one really around here thinks this thing's going to last for a whole year, but the president said they've reached an agreement for 1 year where they're not going to escalate with regards to rare earths, critical minerals, magnets, and China has agreed to start resuming some soybean purchases that would land in 2026. So would not be very immediately on there. Most significant for those of you that are competing with China or importing from China, they're cutting the IEEPA fentanyl tariff in half from 20% to 10%. This isn't going to get rid of all the IEEPAs. You still have a 34% tariff rate on China for reciprocal tariffs under IEEPA. So now that's going to be a 44% under IEEPA. The president tweets it's 57 down to 47 because you add on some of the general duty rates that are on there. This also does not impact the 7.5% and 25% on the China 301 tariffs, nor does it impact the Section 232 steel, aluminum, copper parts, and otherwise. So this is an agreement, but it's more of a detente in order to Trump to travel to China and to continue the status quo that, frankly, most of us thought we were going to end up here anyway, where China tariffs our goods at 10%, we tariff theirs in the ballpark of 30 to 50%, and that seems to where we are. The
And Omar, just while you're speaking, the president said on Air Force One that he would like to drop an extra 10% tariff. He would like to drop the another 10% of the tariff against China. So we'll see.
I appreciate that in real time, and that's really important. Jump in here. Thank you for that, Paul, because the Chinese on their list from Sunday's talks in Kuala Lumpur with the U.S. counterparts ahead of the principles was that they wanted all 20% gone, and that's why honestly it was a little surprising that they only ended up lifting 10% because the Chinese one don't accept fully the premise on the fentanyl tariffs to begin with, but they absolutely were trying to get rid of all 20. So thank you, Paul. You're getting your updates, folks, in real time here. So note that's where we are there. Also on the vessels, and this one, they already started implementing the vessel tariff in some ways and the fees, but they were self-declared and self-reporting. And so now they're going to suspend some of these port fees rather for 1 year. So there's also some more confusion on that sense. Now let's go in the other direction. President gets upset. If Caitlin was here, she'd probably provide some more color on the true social side of it. But the president got upset over the campaign ad, not campaign ad, but the ad about Ronald Reagan talking about how tariffs are a threat to national security, using footage from him, and they aired that during the World Series. Encourage you to check those out. They will not be running tonight during the World Series game. Can't believe I'm rooting for Canadians to win that, and so we'll see where we go from there. But please note that this 10% additional on Canada is on non-USMCA conforming goods, which brings us up to 45%. USTR now has multiple actions that they are pending on. One is on Nicaragua, 301 action. Another one is on China Maritime, although in the readout from the Chinese side, they said the U.S. has agreed to suspend this 301 investigation that might lead to additional tariffs. This was going to be separate from the vessel action that was already there. China's the largest shipbuilding nation around. It's not even close. And just an aside for those of you that want to learn more about this topic, Council of Foreign Relations, the president's inbox, just had a great podcast yesterday talking about China's shipbuilding and the dual use of a lot of their carriers out there for military and commercial purposes. But Chinese have said we've agreed to suspend this temporarily, but this is the one that Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, said we're going to continue, and that is looking into the obligations of China under their Phase 1 agreement, whether or not they've lived up to that. Short answer, they have not, but that review is going to continue, and again, could lead to tariffs. And what you see happening here on these 301 actions is what we've all predicted. If the president's expecting to lose or may lose at the Supreme Court on those reciprocal tariffs, the administration wants to be prepared to move forward using other trade laws such as the 232 on products and these 301s on countries as well. The U.S. Trade Representative is having a hearing on November the 16th with regards to the USMCA review. That's the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, and accepting public comments coming in through on Monday. So they are moving forward on that side, and you should expect, just as you saw the 10% increase on Canada threat from the president, to see some of these back and forth continue to go there. But Paul, to my point, a lot of these actions really are setting the stage for next week's hearing at the Supreme Court. And plug the podcast.
Yes, all the trade folks, trade lawyers, lobbyists, everybody working on trade policy, all eyes will be on the Supreme Court on November 5th when the hearing on the IEEPA, which are the reciprocal tariffs, takes place. So there are three different plaintiffs in this hearing. There is a educational toy manufacturer in Illinois. There's a company out in California. They had two separate cases. And then there is states attorneys from various states. All these have been consolidated into one hearing. Last week, the Supreme Court told the two private companies that they can only have one lawyer present for them. So they have the California company's lawyer, who's a former acting Solicitor General, is going to argue for the 20 minutes for the private sector. Look, there's, I've talked to several trade lawyers, and they're not sure how this is going to go. It was 7-4 on the appeal side that in favor of overturning the tariffs. The appeals court, all 11 judges, which is somewhat unusual, ruled on that. So you talk to some trade lawyers who say that they think it's going to be overturned, and you have others that don't. Then you have another group that says, well, they might just do something very narrow. Obviously, unwinding tariffs, if the tariffs are overturned, and what to do about how to process the refunds that would have to be put in place would be a big question. The earliest that a ruling is expected is at the end of December or January. So this is not to say, as Omar has been emphasizing and as I have, that this takes away the president's power to impose tariffs completely if he loses this case, because the 232 tariffs, those are tariffs under Section 232, it's called the National Security section of the trade law. And that is what steel and aluminum tariffs are under. Those would not be impacted or affected in any way by this ruling. Those were, as I said, imposed under a different section of the trade law, and also the Supreme Court declined to hear a challenge to the president's authority to impose those tariffs back in the first Trump administration. So the president does have a lot of other levers that he can pull regarding if he wants to impose tariffs, but certainly it would make it a little more challenging and more complicated. And also, as I said, the unwinding of these tariffs would also be very challenging to do. So lots of happenings. I'm going to a listening party, which is a nerd festival at a trade law firm, to listen to during the case, and so there's a lot of activity next week.
I thought I was a loser on
Yeah,
policy
I
issue,
know.
Paul.
Sad. And obviously, as I don't have to tell you, U.S. steel prices are still higher than the rest of the world. That top blue line is the difference between U.S. prices, and I think the graph kind of got screwed up as far as naming the other countries, but it shows world prices, China, Canada, and scrap prices. We had a question about, is there any oversight of domestic stainless mills and their price increases? Unfortunately, no, there's not, unless Omar, you disagrees with me. I mean, the one purpose of a tariff is to allow the domestic industry to raise their prices, and that's what they're doing. The consequences of the tariff. So I don't see any challenges right now, or much oversight. Although you did see the president on Truth Social tell the beef producers in the U.S. that they should bring their prices down when they started complaining about the president saying that we would get more imports of beef from Argentina to reduce prices. So you never know, but there's not going to be a formal mechanism unless there's some antitrust activity taking place. Then there would be that kind of investigation.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment in the question that was posed. So, Paul, thanks for starting on that. While we're here, we might as well pick up on that a bit more. And maybe, Paul, this might be a conversation for the coalition a little bit too, that your shop runs, because if we can start putting together a one pager for the White House that says, here's the price increase from this company, and here's where they said they're cutting capacity or where they're not bringing more metal online, and that can start getting into those areas. Because yes, we agree, and we've heard reports of companies taking advantage of some of the opportunities to increase their prices.
Yeah, for sure. And we could have the coalition take a look at that and urge a closer look at that. I mean, we've heard a lot of complaints, and we know, among the stainless and other steel products, the shortage of domestic suppliers, and some of the issues that steel users, you all are confronting.
Yep. All right. So a few more things here as we get ready to wrap it up, and a couple more quick data points that we look at. Here, trade with Canada, speaking of which, is, as you can imagine, dropping. And that's where we're going low, low, low. And I think it's going to bounce back here as we get to a resolution, but you can see some of those numbers. Mexican economy slowing over the years. We removed some of the commentary that was put in by Bloomberg. Their emphasis was more on look which party is in power and the impact on their GDP. Really looking at what AMLO and some of the challenges from the previous administration. But overall, the numbers in these charts we think are significant, especially in the context of USMCA and some of the One Voice customer base that's down there as well. This further emphasizes the challenges the United States has with regards to rare earths and the dominance that China has for inputs in everything from vehicles to fighter jets. And that's where some of the emphasis you're seeing from this administration come from. Last one on the charts here. We've now seen quite a change going on from the HR side in terms of job hopping, people moving around, and you're starting to see that they're not actually increasing more pay by moving to another position, another shop. And we've asked about this in our annual surveys for a few times, so we look forward to seeing what the results might be this January when we ask it there again. We're getting ready to wrap up here. Please enter any questions you might have in the Q&A box. As always, you can get more from us on the One Voice podcast. We did just record that podcast, I think a week before last, with the individual that is one of the main lead petitioners for this case. So we strongly encourage you to take a look and listen to that. That was posted online on October the 10th. So it'll give you a really good insight and context for that already as well. And then also please stay in touch any way you can. Support the fundraising efforts of both associations that make this webinar, podcast, and all our activities possible that are out there as well. And as always, please reach out to us here in Washington or to Jenny at NTMA, Christy at PMA, Roger, David, any of us. We're happy to answer more questions or provide more information as you all need it. One question that just came in here, and this is a very excellent point. Question came in. I'm concerned about the United States trying to negotiate bilaterally with Canada and Mexico instead of altogether trilaterally. And this is absolutely correct. The White House is taking the strategic position that they want to negotiate bilaterally with Canada and Mexico separately. This picks up on something Bob Lighthizer, the former U.S. Trade Representative under Trump 1, was doing. He believed that we would have stronger leverage with the United States in negotiations in one-on-one. The United States also wants to address a number of issues with Canada that are specific to them, everything from Chinese steel imports to energy, critical minerals, dairy, softwood lumbers, digital service tax, and a few others. And then separately, they want to deal with Mexico, especially on China imports, regional value content, rules of origin for automotive, and melted and poured on steel requirements and smelt and cast. But your question and your premise is absolutely correct. There should be concern, especially if you have products that are moving across all three borders. In many cases, you do. And certainly the person that asked the question, I know you do. But yes, the president is going forward. He wants one-on-one deals. He does not see as much value in a trilateral, multilateral deal that we've got under the current framework. So that's not to say we're going to eliminate the USMCA, but there's talk in Washington about agreement with Canada, agreement with Mexico, and then a broader agreement that might encompass more of those broader things that can create some complications. So yes, we are absolutely seeing that and not only hearing that happening around town, and that is an area some have posted some concern on. Any other questions? Anything else that we can add on since we're now 11 minutes past what Paul promised we would do? No. Thank you all. We know we had quite a bit get added last minute on the slide deck with all the trades. So if you do need any more details than what was provided herein, please click on those links below or reach out to us. Until then, we will talk next time. We are not going to do a webinar in the calendar of November due to the 28th being the day after Thanksgiving. So our next webinar is going to be on December the 5th at noon Eastern. Friday, December 5 at noon Eastern is our next scheduled One Voice update. Until then, as always, please feel free to reach out. Thank you as always, folks.
Thank you.